So this presentation, we are going to look into the assessment for a DMD child. So to start with, let's brush up the relevant anatomy. As we have already seen that the primary cause is absence of dystrophin, which is a protein required for the entire muscular metabolism. So this dystrophin is responsible for connecting the cytoskeleton of each muscle fiber to the underlying basal lamina. Now, this absence of dystrophin stops calcium entering the cell membrane, affecting the signaling of the cell. So, the water enters the mitochondria, causing the cell to burst. So, there starts the several processes where there is increased oxidative stress within the cell, which damages the cell and the sarcolemma, and ultimately leads to the death of the cell. And so, the muscle fibers undergo necrosis, that is death, and they are replaced by connective tissue or fat. Not only in the muscles, dystrophin is also made in the certain parts of the neurons in the brain, especially in the hippocampus. So this hippocampus is something involved with learning and memory, and maybe in the early stage we don't see some changes in the cognitive aspects, but in late stages we do see some behavioral changes and cognitive problems could be seen. Maybe that could be attributed to the loss of dystrophin in the neurons of the hippocampus and the parts of the brain which are connected to the hippocampus. And also a gene has been implicated which leads to lack of dystrophin and ultimately the loss of muscles. So looking into the clinical presentation, this disease is primarily affecting the skeletal muscles, and that too the proximal muscles, and which are close to the trunk of the body, around the hips and the shoulders. And there is a symmetrical pattern, and you can see the pattern moving from proximal to the distal aspect. So as this affects only males, and females are carriers, and in the course of the development, the, there is a kind of a delay. It's not due to the developmental dysfunctions, but some delay would be observed by the parents, and they would come for some kind of a screening. So once you do that, you don't have any other relevant neurological problems, and getting into their proper history. You just go with getting the information from the parents or the caregivers who are along with the child, and then you have to kind of correlate the clinical picture which you see in that boy, and whether it fits into the kind of myopathy, and that's the way you have to judge this. And then further you have many ways of progressing and confirming the diagnosis. So basically, this entire scenario you can see very well before 5 years, around 1 to 3 years, or for 5 years, when the child starts walking clumsily and tend to falls. There will be difficulty in getting up unaided. And in our culture, we do have a saying that boys will walk little bit later. So overcoming all those cultural influences, you have to get in the entire clinical picture. And the symmetrical involvement, you can see a picture of symmetrical muscle wasting, especially in brachioradialis. Sternal part of pectoral is major, latissimus dorsi, and and as I told you, you can see more in the proximal muscles compared to the distal muscles. So the pelvic girdle muscles, that is the gluteus and the iliopsoas, adductor magnus, will be first affected. And in the shoulder girdle, you can see supraspinatus, subscapularis, infraspinatus, deltoid, latissimus dorsi, serratus anterior. These are the muscles which you can classically involved. Along with that, you can see in the later stages the distal muscles, finger muscles will be involved, neck flexors, extensors atrophy. So you can see a progression over a period of time. And slowly the involved muscles will be replaced by fat, and most commonly you can see pseudo hypertrophy in the calf muscles. That's the fat infiltration. Extensor digitorum brevis, quadriceps, infraspinatus, deltoid, and gluteus all will have marked infiltration with fat and fibrous tissue, and later it disappears as the disease advances. So there will be complete atrophy. initially there will be fat infiltration, which looks like a hypertrophy, but it is not a real hypertrophy. It is pseudo hypertrophy. And coming into the muscle weakness, as it is more in the trunk level, when it is more in the trunk level, you can see lordosis on standing, and the trunk will be thrown back to displace the COG behind the vertebral column to maintain the child's balance. And the same time, you can see Gova's sign. It's like climbing on himself. So there is a saying like child struggles as he stands and he waddles as he walks. So as the trunk muscles are involved and you get intercostal muscle weakness, tachycardia would be seen, and accessory muscle weakness also slowly will set in. And considering the sensations will not be much impaired, and tendon reflexes will be diminished in the early stage, and later on it will be ultimately lost. And in the late ambulatory stage, there will be more frequency of falls, and the ability of the child to get up from the floor will be very, difficult and more laborious for the child. And around 10 years, the child will lose the ability to walk, 10 to 12 years, and child will need some kind of support to move around. So now, child made to sit in the wheelchair, which is called as wheelchair phase. So it starts sitting in a wheelchair. This lordosis will be replaced now by scoliosis or kyphoscoliosis. And the respiratory muscle weakness will become more severe, and contractures and deformities will start setting in. So slowly at one point, muscle weakness will become very severe and extreme, and respiratory disturbances, that will be more of frequent chest infections, respiratory insufficiency, and along with that scoliosis. So everything will make, and the contractures will make the survival of the child very difficult. And sooner they will be needing some kind of support for their respiration. So they become bedridden, and at one point there will be a respiratory failure due to infection or gastric dilatation and aspirations, and death may ultimately occur around second or third decade. And in BMD, this scenario will be little bit elongated, maybe around 40 years this may happen. So that's the difference. Now along with this, there will be a lot of other problems. Since child not able to move around, obesity will be a concern in the ambulatory phase and in the late stage, and constipation will be a problem as he is no longer ambulant. And because of loss of ambulation and loss of that voluntary control of continence, there will be overflow incontinence can occur. So in bladder, you get overflow incontinence, and due to the, maybe they're lying for a long time, the pressure on the superior mesenteric vesicle can lead to frequent vomiting, and so this kind of, and lack of movement and muscle weakness can lead to kind of the muscle ache. So these are something which you can see in the late stage, along with abnormal positioning will lead to contractures, bed sores, all the bed rest complications may set in. So this is the entire clinical presentation at different stage. So ambulatory, wheelchair, and bedridden is the course of the disease. So subjective details, you can get the name, age, and all those details. And DMD, as I told you, you can find it in 6 years, and BMD around 15-25 years. And FSH, fascioscapular, will be seen around adolescent ages, and the distal myopathies will be seen around 40 years, middle ages. So that's the age. And you can get the occupation, mostly it will be in the infancy, and certain types of myopathy occur in the late adult stage. And complaints, so chief complaints, so you can so relevant to the child, we ask the questions, uh, and when you're asking the going into the history taking, ask the motor pattern of the disease, is there any sensory involvement, symmetricity of the disease, asymmetricity, associated problems. So keeping the disease in mind, you should ask the questions in all aspects. Looking into the medical history, there are as such no direct drugs to cure the disease, but you do have some steroids which will help in delaying the prognosis. Along with this, sometimes the child may have other associated congenital problems like CTEV, or they can have even Erb's palsy, some kind of upper limb or hip dysfunction. So those all has to be noted. And the other aspects which you have to notice, a child, whether it's going for regular schooling, what is the intelligent level of the child, and the psychosocial history of the child, because child will be able to participate in a regular exercise program to improve his quality of the life. And the family history, the uncle might be died with DMD and the mother will be carrier, and the associated problems like pressure. So all those things in your regular pattern of assessment has to be considered. So status is like patient is not going to have any disturbance in the higher functions in the early stage. So he'll be well conscious, oriented, memory will be good, and he will be not having much problems in cognitive status, provided if child is not given the right education appropriate for the age, maybe the IQ level will be very less, and the problem solving abilities, depending upon the exposure the child has, the higher functions will be appropriate. Cranial nerves as such, in DMD, none of the cranial nerves are affected uh, because of DMD. So we can look into the developmental assessment, because you're picking up the child in the early stage. So whether there is any delayed motor development, as a part of the screening to rule out other diseases and to channelize the diagnosis of DMD, this is done. So neck flexor weakness when pulled to sit is the classical sign which you have to look. Inability to hop and jump, Gower sign, difficulty in running, ascending and descending steps, and frequent falls, toe walking because of tightness of TE and weakness, and maybe delayed walking. And characteristic gait, in the early stage when child is ambulatory, there will be a more of anterior pelvic tilt, lumbar lordotic gait classically seen, and there could be some kind of lean during walking, or because of the bilateral gluteus medius weakness, there could be waddling gait, even Trendelenburg sign you can see. And there will be some other associated movement patterns like excessive arm swing to increase the momentum for walking, or swinging the legs so much to gain the stride length or step length. So some kind of abnormal movement patterns you can see, and or maybe pronation and eversion because of the foot muscle weakness. And so we have to do a complete developmental assessment to get an entire picture. Coming to the neuromuscular assessment, so we start with the basics like bulk, tone, and DTR. So the nutrition will be definitely reduced, but the bulk, if you see in the early stage, there will be a pseudo hypertrophy, but then later on there will be wasting. And tone, it's not any upper motor neuron disease like you see spasticity, no. Because of the loss of muscle bulk, there will be LMN hypotonia, flaccidity. And but initially it will be normal in the early stages. When they are ambulatory, it will be normal, but in later stages only you can, as the muscle loses its fibers, you can see there is decrease in the tone. So DTR, initially you won't find any changes, but later on you will be finding it diminished, because you will not have any muscle fibers to give you the response. And reflexes, so the superficial reflexes will be lost as the stage, according to the stage of the child. You won't get any positive response in Babinski because it's not a UMN. But if that muscle weakness sets in the plantar muscles, then you won't get any response because that local reflex arc itself is disturbed. And coming into the DTR also, I here discussed, right? So in deep tendon reflexes, initially you won't find any change, but later on, as the muscle weakness sets in, say for example, triceps reflex, as the triceps become weak, you will be getting a diminished response. And sensations, mostly they are normal in the early stage, but later stage, because of the ongoing muscle weakness and loss of ambulation, there could be a mild sensory loss or numbness. And pain, loss of ambulation can lead to muscle ache. And maybe in the late ambulatory stage, if the child is wearing any splints or orthosis for support for walking, always we need to look for any pressure source. And in the late stage, you can see changes in the skin also. So the integumentary changes also we need to see. Then autonomic changes. A child is not ambulatory, becomes bedridden, and in the later stages, you can see some kind of autonomic disturbances. So the composite impairments are posture, balance, and gait, which are the problems which the child faces due to the primary impairments. So as the muscle weakness sets in, definitely the posture will be disturbed, and as the muscle strength decreases and the alignment is disturbed, the balance will be lost. There will be frequent falls, and gait also there will be a typical uh, gait according to the muscles which are becoming weak. So classically, a DMD gait is supposed to be a waddling gait. When the child is in the late ambulatory stage, you can see a classical waddling gait because of the proximal hip muscles weakness. Respiratory assessment in the late wheelchair phase and in the bedridden phase. Uh, the child, now teenager, will not require a ventilator in the early stage, but in the end stage, he may require a ventilator for support. So accordingly, we need to go with the assessment. So on ventilator, if you get a chance to assess the patient, we can go with that. But considering this, the early stage ambulatory assessment, MMT, is very, very important to chart out the progression of the child's muscle weakness. So respiratory assessment, if you want to elaborate, it's like observation, looking for any paradoxical muscular breathing, and palpation, looking for any consultations or examination, especially with the stethoscope, to auscultate and look for the air entry and look for the secretions, and the cuff strength, especially in the late wheelchair phase and in the bedridden phase. The evaluation of the cuff is very important because we want to improve the quality of the life of the person by not getting any pulmonary infections. So secretion collections should be prevented as much as possible. So for that, the cuff strength or evaluation is very, very important. And we do go with aerobic capacity assessment by as long as child is able to walk, you can do anything in walking, like 2-minute walk test to 6-minute walk test. And when child is on wheelchair phase, maybe in sitting, you can go with the arm ergometry. And then in bedridden stage, maybe a simple test like bedside blowing the candle, blowing the matchstick, simple test could be done. Now into the musculoskeletal assessment. So the range of motion, active, passive, both are very, very important here. As the muscle weakness goes on, the active range of motion will reduce. But what is important is the passive range of motion has to be maintained to prevent any tightness and contractures as the disease progresses. Flexibility. Now, flexibility, typical kind of MND what we did. Similarly, the flexibility has to be maintained. So if the flexibility is lost, especially in TA or in hamstrings or adductors or hip flexors, so to rule out that, always we do the routine flexibility tests and maintain the flexibility. So complications, especially in the late stage, chest complications, pressure sores, early stage falls prevention, and in wheelchair phase, looking for any low back pain or neck pain. So this is something which you should always. And the other assessments, they do have lot of assessments according to the stage. In ambulatory phase, wheelchair phase, bedridden phase, what is required as per that stage, we can add up then and there. So the diagnostic procedures are, uh, best is always to go confirm with the GOVAS sign. So GOVAS sign is one, and then we do have some other special tests, that is Merion signs, MERYONS, Merion sign. So when you try to lift the child by holding under the axilla, due to the weakness of all the rotator cuff muscles and scapular muscles, that is in one word, scapular stability is poor now. So the child will slip from your grip. So we have to keep this point in your mind when you are handling the child or transferring the child in future. We don't hold the child under the axilla, because the child will be not able to fix his shoulder girdle on your hands. So that is Marion's sign. And a reaching test is there to find out the progression of upper limb weakness. So in stage 1, the child will be able to do a normal one arm lift and the elbow will be raised by shoulder flexors. And in stage 2, what happens is the child will lift one arm with the help of the other arm. So two arm lift will be there. And stage 3, limited two arm lift. Child can't lift both the arms. So this is reaching test. So these are some special tests from the physiotherapy point of view. So the investigations, the primary investigation is muscle biopsy. So a small sample of the muscle, which is not completely replaced by fat, not a muscle which is having a kind of muscle part 3 or 4 will be examined, and the muscle fibers will be analyzed for the presence of the nucleus, and the splitting of fibers all will be seen. And usually what you can see, this is done under local anesthesia, and there will be great variations in size among different fibers in the same muscle, and the nucleus of the fibers will be migrated towards the center, which is a sign of degeneration, and certain muscle fibers will be infiltrated by fat and fibrous tissues. This is what classically you can see in a muscle biopsy. And blood test is done to look for the serum creatine kinase. So in children with DMD, it is very high than the normal, which is 80 ml, but for them you can see up to 10 to 100 times more than this. Why in the sense is, since this enzyme has to be present within the muscle, but because of the degeneration which is happening in the muscle, the enzymes will be leaked out, and it will be in the blood, which is a sign of degeneration. So that's a very important test. And looking into EMG, EMG is electromyography, where a needle is inserted into the muscle which is functioning, like partially weak, and you analyze for the action potentials when the child is asked to do a minimal voluntary contraction or maximal voluntary contraction. So when you insert a needle, usually there will be some insertional activities in any muscle because this kind of irritation is happening. So if the muscle is completely replaced by fat, you don't get any insertional activity. And after that, what happens is you look for some spontaneous activity. This all happens in few seconds. So once you insert the needle, you look for insertional activity, and then you look for some spontaneous activities. So because of the muscle fiber splitting and degeneration, you can see sometimes fibrillations. And then when you ask the child to do a minimal voluntary contraction to analyze the action potentials generated by the motor units, you can see a small, very small, because the muscle fibers are less, that a motor unit can generate only a small short duration action potentials. And since the muscle fibers are now splitted, and now transmission time is very less, you get a wider polyphasic, instead of a triphasic you get a polyphasic muscle action potential. So this is the classical motor unit action potentials which you can see in a DMD. Small short duration polyphasic muscle action potentials will be seen. And we do look for the recruitment and interferences. That also we have classical ways which you look in the later stages. There will be no muscle recruitment also. That means the muscle, like in ECG house, you see a straight line. You can see a straight line, no interference pattern, straight line in a DMD boy's muscle. And as necessary, X-rays, ECG, PFT will be done according to the stage. So you have a frequent fall, you look for any fracture, X-rays will be done, and later stage you want to look for any rule out any problems. There's persistent tachycardia, ECG will be done to look for the pulmonary functioning, PFT will be done, or maybe in the late stage you want to look for any cardiac problems. There could be a secondary cardiac myopathy. So for that, maybe you can go with any angio or a Doppler. So the investigation goes on as the need of the patient. So prognosis, sadly, there is no cure for Duchenne's, and you have a lot of ways to improve the quality of life and to increase the survival of the child. Steroids are commonly used, and in the in the ambulatory stage, the primary aim is to keep the child ambulatory as long as possible. as a physiotherapist, the primary aim for a DMD boy who comes to you in this early phase is to keep the child as long as ambulatory. Keep him ambulatory as long as possible. And the second aim will be to prevent any complications which arises as the disease progresses. So these are the two important aims. So considering that in the late ambulatory stage, maybe some surgeries might be planned for the child, maybe TA release. And if there is any feeding issues in the bedridden stage, feeding tubes will be inserted. So depending upon the problems, some kind of surgeries will be planned to improve the quality of the DMD child. And the outcome measures. So as we have disease specific scales for other conditions, we do have here also. So we have something given by Vignos and Brooks scale to assess the functional changes in a DMD boy. And along with that, you can do the routine 6-minute walk test or time to climb 4 steps or North Star assessment scale, any functional test, because functional assessment is very, very important here. MMT, functional assessment, respiratory assessment, uh, complication preventions are very, very important. So classical MMT charting has to be done, and functional assessment is very important, so that you uh, do this once in 6 months or a year and you see the progression of the disease. So this is the description of the Brook and the Vigno scale. So in Brook scale, you have 1 to 6 categories. The grade 1 is starting with the arms at the sides, the patient may be able to abduct the arms in a full circle above the head. And 2 is can raise the arms above the head only by flexing the elbow, it is shortening the circumference of the movement, or by using accessory muscles. And 3 is cannot raise the hands above the head but can raise an kind of one glass of water to the mouth. So functionally he is able to do. Grade 4 is can raise hands to the mouth but cannot raise a glass of water to the mouth. Maybe he require a table support. And grade 5 is cannot raise the hands to the mouth but can use hands to hold a pen or pick up. So maybe he'll be not able to move his hand against the gravity, but having a stable surface, he has the ability to move around that stable surface on a table. With the support of the table board, he can do certain works. And 6 is nothing could be possible, cannot raise the hands to the mouth and has no useful function of the hands, because see, two functions are very important. One is taking your hand to the mouth for feeding and eating, and second one is keeping your forearm stabilized in the table and using your hand to do certain activities. So if those two are lost, then there is no function. So that is what grade 6. So this is for Brooks scale is for upper extremity. And you have Vigno's scale. He has given a grading for lower extremity functional dependence. That is grade 1, walking and climbing stairs without assistance, you give grade 1. Walks and climbs stairs with the aid of the railing, you give grade 2. What is grade 3? Walks and climbs stairs slowly with the aid of railing. So maybe a time count could be added up here. Grade 4 is walks unassisted and rises from chair but cannot climb stairs. And 5 is walks unassisted but cannot rise from chair or climb stairs. And grade 6 is walks only with assistance. So now here onwards the child may require assistance or walks independently with long leg braces, because you don't have the support of the quadriceps or hip extensors to give you the anti-gravity support. So you need a long leg braces. And grade 7 is walks in long leg braces but requires assistance for balance. You need that could be a somebody nearby or a wall support. Grade 8 is stands in long only standing, no longer walking. So stands in long leg braces but unable to walk even with assistance. It's not possible. 9 he is in wheelchair and 10 is confined to bed. So this is what the grading given for lower extremity functional performance using Vigno scale. Now the problem list. So the problem list depend according to the stage progression of the disease. So if you see in the ambulatory phase, inability to stand or sit or walk, and not able to reach for the overhead objects, difficulty in taking the objects, maybe little late ambulatory, difficulty in manipulating the objects, difficulty in doing the ADL. So This is how the problems vary according, but ultimately muscle weakness is the primary problem. So as we frame the problem list, then we will be going with the treatment plan. So the treatment plan is patient is not going to recover, but we need to maintain the quality. We need to give the maintenance therapy. So we have, as I told you already, we have to keep them walking as long as possible. So the first treatment plan should be always to boost up their psychological confidence and to gain their cooperation and to re-educate or retrain the muscles. So we do have some methods for that. And then to maintain the flexibility will be your next plan. And then your uh, improve the quality of life with the help of in assistive devices, and then bladder and bowel care, wheelchair transfers, and all those. So this all will be your plan and the management. So with that, I end this presentation.